So you need to think much ahead in terms of paper, you know. Although you already written up the proposal is just, you know, rough ideas. I think some of you might begin again, change it. And you know, I still need to give you guidelines for papers, but what I'm going to look at, you know, some of those already in the proposal guidelines, but if I want to add several more, then what I'm going to look at is whether or not, number one, I think whether or not the paper addresses interesting and policy or academic relevant issues. That's one important criteria. Whether or not the paper addresses, you know, interesting. So, you know, when I read these papers, I'm going to ask myself, right? Ask myself, is this interesting? Right? That's number one, I think, important criteria. Is this interesting? Interesting meaning it doesn't. The worst thing you do is to repeat old historical information. That's the worst thing you do, right? So don't do it, right? Don't do it. So you need to address current perspectives. Okay, you need to address current perspectives, and so that's current perspectives, right? Make your paper interesting. Current perspectives, policy relevant, right? Contribution, right? You have to make some contribution to policy circles or to academic, right, circles. You need to make some contribution, right? So number one is this interesting? Does this break any new ground? Does this make any contribution, right? So both of these, what do these both mean is something new, right? Something new. You should not repeat old information, right? We are looking for something new. Relating to that, the third one, you need to build on the knowledge which covered in class. Right? You need to build, in other words, right. You should not 100% distract from course outlines, right? Right. So the third component will be whether or not the paper builds on class discussions, right? Somehow there must be some, your paper must be like an additional follow-up, right? Additional follow-up on our class, right, materials or class discussions. Right? So it's okay. I mean, the class syllabus, I mean, does mention climate change, right? So if you are interested in climate change, then there are a number of areas where you can discuss climate change topics, like climate change, but climate change which doesn't divert enormously from class scope. In other words, climate change that is relevant to like shale gas development, or climate change that is relevant to Arctic geopolitics, Arctic energy, right? You understand what I'm saying, right? So you need to build on class materials and class discussions. And the link between previous work and the current work, right? You need to somehow discuss, right? What's the gap in previous research? How does your research fill that gap, right? Which is important. You need to somehow make a link between right, other materials and your material. Let me, the length was 15 pages, right? But 15 pages is not short. It's a lot of work. So just go ahead and do it. And if you think it's too much, let me know. But writing a short one is not also easy either, right? So either way, I mean, let me know. I mean, I can shorten it to, maybe 10 to 12. But it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I think, writing a shorter paper sometimes will be much more difficult. That's it. I think I'm going to write up those things on the paper, then give it to you. Now, Arctic. Some of the bases we sort of laid down last class. And to summarize, I think what we have discussed is Arctic is important because, number one, there is a drastic scientific climate change, right, underway. So climate change, I think there must be a lot of work done on this issue, climate change in the Arctic, right? We went into some details of, why Arctic climate change important from global perspectives, right, and regional perspectives. The impact of Arctic climate change goes beyond the regional, right, changes. So climate change, if you want, I mean, you can think about, this as a paper topic, climate change. Then second, resource extraction. The second issue, resource extraction. Climate change doesn't pose like a challenge as a conflictual issue for countries, because climate change, that's something that's common public goods, right? Countries get together, right? Think about ways of resolving these environmental risks in the Arctic, right? So this, I think, combines countries. This climate change issue combines countries. So there is no, I think, room for conflicts among countries over these issues, right? And countries, I think, they make the most of it, right? They do environmental diplomacy, particularly outsiders, non-Arctic states who want to get, more involved in Arctic affairs. This is a good, issue for them, right? China, Japan, particularly, right? They show to the world that they care about the environment and climate in the Arctic, right? So that China, in particular, I think China does sort of so-called scientific diplomacy, environmental diplomacy, right? To show that they care a lot about, right, these issues. So this is public goods. Nothing about conflicts among countries. Second issue, resource extraction. A lot of room for conflicts, like I said, right? Resource extraction. And huge potential, and mostly business, economic opportunities, right? A lot of profits, right, they can expect from resource extraction. And the size of Arctic resources, we I think discovered that 2008 USGS, famous USGS survey, right, or report. According to that report, like 30% of global natural gas, right, resources might come from the Arctic. 13% oil, another 20% liquids, right? This is official, I think, figure. The U.S. Announced, which is often cited by many people, right? This 2008 USGS figure cited a lot by many people and institutions. But again, a lot of uncertainty, right? We have to admit that this figure is most authoritative, but still a lot of uncertainty about this. Why resource extraction is becoming a bone of contention, I think, is that it all comes down to the issue of delimitation, territorial, right, delimitation. Because depending on where you draw a line, right, these resources belong to different countries, right? So there are huge amounts of resources there, right? Depending on different figures, but there's a huge amount of resources. But who owns it? That's the bone of contention, resource extraction. It's similar to Caspian resource extraction issue, Caspian, right? Caspian, again, Caspian energy, there is onshore resources, but much, again, under the sea, offshore. Arctic, 85% of Arctic resources, if you read, I think, our textbook, 85 of Arctic resources offshore. Only 15% of Arctic resources, known reserves in the Arctic, onshore. 85 under the sea, right? Which is useful to remember, right? Which shows the pattern of future Arctic conflicts, right? This, resource component, right? Offshore 85 shows, right, the pattern of future Arctic conflicts. We can infer from these, figures. Caspian, I don't know the percentage between offshore, onshore. Do you know? More onshore of the Caspian Sea, right? Arctic, right? It's mostly offshore, but Caspian much onshore. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. In Kazakhstan.
But still, again, Caspian energy. The issue is also how to draw a line, right? Iran, Turkmenistan, they have a conflict over resources, offshore resources, right? It has not been resolved yet, right? Iran, Turkmenistan. So when they have these delimitation issues, what happens is, Turkmenistan is courting many countries, right, to be a partner in resource extraction. Then America is interested, right? Europeans are interested. Many countries are interested. But the reason they cannot easily tap into these Turkmenistan resources, offshore resources, right? Some work done already on onshore natural gas. Turkmenistan has a lot of onshore, but offshore ones still untouched because of these territorial issues, territorial boundaries have not been resolved. So when Americans are interested, and which is what happened, like Azerbaijan, they have begun extracting, right? offshore natural gas, right? So when Azerbaijan was extracting resources offshore, along with Western companies, Iran, showing Iranian surface warships, flexing muscles, showing power to resist that. Right? That's what happens. So that's probably what we can expect in the future in the Arctic, right? When resource development is done on a much more fuller scale than this kind of things we saw in the Caspian Sea, we can expect also in the Arctic. That's why you need to station these submarines, different countries, right? In preparation for this kind of contingency, you need to store some weapons, submarines or surface warships, gunboats. You need those weapons because of this kind of contingencies. So sea delimitation, boundary delimitation is still on the way, and we have legal issues there, right? UN clause, stipulations in the UN clause. We have EEZ, exclusive economic zones. Then 12 miles freely given. Then you have 200-mile EEZ, right? Beyond 200-mile EEZ, you have continental shelf, right? Continental shelf is much more contentious. You can see it over there. Much more contentious, right? And Russia is probably Russia is known to have the largest continental shelf beyond the EEZ. And Russia's claim on these were rejected, right? So this resource extraction, I think that those issues, and our textbook is very good on these aspects. Our textbook, I think solely our chapter on the Arctic, Charles Emerson, he devotes the entire chapter solely to this issue, resource extraction. He doesn't cover these legal issues, delimitation, boundary issues, but he addresses mostly, which companies are developing where, right? All these business, a lot of current perspectives on what's going on about these resource development projects here and there. According to Charles Emerson, the Arctic is very diverse. He says many Arctics. Right? By that he means probably he, I think, contradicts some definition of the Arctic Ocean. And also geographically and geologically, the Arctic is very diverse. Some oceans are more favorable to exploitation, like Arctic extraction, resource extraction. Some seas like he discusses where resource extraction is more like easier than in other seas, right? He addresses that, right? I think, as I recall, I think the regions in the entire Arctic Ocean may be better places for resource extractions are Barents Sea. Barents Sea. It's not freezing sea, so better. He argues that that's where a lot of future resource extraction can be done. Barents Sea, and the coast of Norway, very good place. Coast of Norway, very good place. A lot of Russian coastlines are very harsh, very difficult. So that extraction cost must be higher. So it all comes down to cost issue, right? These geographic characters, it all comes down to cost, right? So Norwegian Arctic resources are very favorable in terms of geology, in terms of climate, in terms of the conditions, very good. And Norway already provides natural gas. I think is it 25% of European natural gas, right? Third largest, right? Third largest. Norway provides a lot of natural gas to Europe because of due to Arctic natural gas, right? Due to Arctic natural gas, Norway is expected to provide more natural gas. This is, I think, important. Norway, because of Arctic LNG, both Arctic LNG, Arctic PNG, both. Norway can provide both, right? LNG and overland pipeline. So Norway is highly prospective. Norwegian Arctic resources, very, according to him, right? Very prospective. Russian Arctic resources. Read the chapter again. The way I read it, a little bit pessimistic. My impression on his writing, the chapter Russian Arctic resources, a little bit pessimistic, cost-wise and everything. So Norway is the best place. Alaska, second best place. U.S., right? U.S. Arctic, Alaska, second best place. But U.S. has its own, reasons, right? What's going on in Alaska is important to know. So those things well explained in this chapter. Current perspectives on Alaska, the U.S. portion of the Arctic, is well explained. So read it. And Greenland, mostly minerals, like I said. Greenland, right? The Danish constituent, right? Country. Greenland, mostly minerals, and some oil, right? All kinds of, but most important mineral from Greenland is rare earth, which has been highlighted a lot several years ago in the media, when China was confronting Japan over some fisherman issue, detained by, right? Who was detained? Maybe China was detained. Chinese fisherman was detained by Japan? Yeah, probably. Chinese fisherman was detained by Japanese authorities, right? Then China confronted directly, right? Boycotting the export of rare earth. Because China provides more than almost 100% of entire global supply of rare earth, including Japan. And rare earth is an essential component of everything, like electronic goods, including smartphones, everything. Without rare earth, There's so many things that you cannot like finish, right? So rare earth is so important. So Greenland is so abundant in rare earth, right? So Greenland is approached by many countries, particularly China, right? A lot of countries, CJK, China, Japan, Korea, particularly the three countries lobby intensely the government of Greenland right, over the rights to over access to these resources, including rare earth and zinc and so many things, a lot of different minerals. So Greenland is that he discusses that. So second issue is resource, right, extraction. Number one, climate change. Second, resource extraction. Number three issue is maritime shipping, right? Maritime shipping. That's the third issue. We discussed that, right? Maritime shipping. Maritime shipping, the key points, I think these new shipping routes open, right? New shipping routes open due to melting ice. And there are two shipping routes. One is NSR, right? NSR linking Europe through the passage of mostly Russian coastlines, right? Then reaching ports in Northeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea, right? Japan, Yokohama, big port, Yokohama. Korea, Busan. China, Shanghai. Different distance, a little bit different distance, right? Number one, why these? Second route is Northwest Passage, right? Northwest Passage, mostly linking the Arctic coastlines to European countries. That's Northwest Passage lines. And the debate on these shipping routes, again, this could be a huge bone of contention, right? Shipping routes issue. Number one issue over this shipping route is Canada claims this Northwest Passage, right? Russia claims most of the NSR routes because, I mean, the issue here is Canada, both Canada and Russia, they argue this international, I think, shipping pass through their own internal territorial seas. This is the issue. This is the issue. So legally, I think we need to contrast two different arguments. One is, does these ships passing these sea routes, does that hinder the sovereignty and jurisdiction over the passage of Canada and Russia? This is the question, most difficult question. Or can Russia, Canada still enjoy jurisdiction and sovereignty over the passage, right? It's their own internal seas, but then still they can go ahead and free navigation for different, right, boats and ships. This is the issue, right? So somehow we need to, right, these two different legal arguments. We need to align these two different legal issues, right? I'm not a legal expert, but somehow they need to, right, study a lot how to align these two different legal arguments, right? So these shipping routes issue, then I think a lot of different figures over like a, shortened distance. Like if you, there was a comparison between traditional routes, right? Why, particularly China, Japan, Korea, why they are so excited over these new routes like shipping NSR? Why are they so excited? Because number one, there is a huge saving, right? There is a huge saving there, right? That's number one reason. Huge profit, right? If you go that way, NSR, there's huge profit. I mean, the profit is just one travel. There are different reports about this. One travel, when one ship travels, then you can save depending on size and depending on specific ports. We are talking about the amount in terms of, I need to see it, maybe, was it $120,000, something like that, one travel, right? There's a fuel saving, right? There's a lot of saving we're talking about here. So monetary saving, that's number one reason. So a lot of companies, right, they're excited about this. Traditional routes, 40 days. 40 days. NSR, 30 days. Right? So 10-day saving. Then fuel, everything, right? You can calculate. So this is very good opportunity. Then ports, like China, Korea, Japan, Singapore, right? They compete to elevate their ports as hub in this different, right? Shipping like a business. They want to make their ports as sort of a center. This is the kind of competition among countries, different countries. So Shanghai, these ports are Shanghai, Yokohama, Busan, then Singapore. They compete. Singapore is a little bit different, right? Singapore is a little bit different because Singapore, right, was granted the permanent observer status, right? Yes, Singapore. Why Singapore shows a particular interest in Arctic affairs? It's different because Singapore, I mean, geographically far distant, right? Yokohama, Busan, they're all benefactors, direct benefactors, but Singapore is, way over there. Then why Singapore gets interested? Right? The reason, Singapore has different reasons. Singapore loses. Singapore is a big loser in the emergence of these, right, new routes. Because Singapore, as you realize, Singapore is coastal state, one of coastal states over Malacca Strait. Malacca Strait has been, right, traditionally has been very busy route through which a lot of ships, right, pass Malacca Strait. 85% of Chinese imports go through this Malacca Strait. Very like a narrow 1.5 mile strait. So why China is so interested in these Arctic, number one, resources and shipping? China traditionally has felt this so-called Malacca dilemma. 85% dependent on Malacca Strait. Right? So this was a energy, right? This has made energy insecurity for Chinese politicians. Right? So either way, they had to escape from this dilemma, Malacca dilemma. So exactly the opposite. Singapore is a big loser. Right? That's why Singapore is interested in Arctic affairs. So traditional routes, comparison of this NSR and traditional routes, Suez Canal, Panama Canal, Malacca Strait, and a lot you know, along the African southern coastlines, right? Like a lot of pirates, right, are active over African, right? So we need to get around these pirate infested, right, areas. So Arctic is so important that for that reason, right? Especially for China. Especially for China. That's why this is one of the reasons why China is interested. So there are a lot of studies, you know, like looking into these different ports, like shipping cost and everything. Right? Yeah. There's so many studies on this. A lot. I mean, you can't read all of them. There's so many, and many of them are very interesting studies. So this is a third kind of issue: shipping, maritime shipping. And number 4 issue is so-called like a geopolitics of Arctic energy, militarization of the Arctic. This is 4th issue, militarization of the Arctic. So this is not quite energy issue. This is just, you know, traditional security or military issue, and not many studies done on this. You know, the way we, I think, have to study this issue, militarization of the Arctic, is first, I think we need to examine, you know, like which countries have what type of weapons in the Arctic region, right? Like Russia. Russia has been studied a lot on this because Russia has been using the Arctic as a military, I think, outpost from relatively early, like from early 20th century. Like the peninsula there, the Kola Peninsula, that is the submarine base, right? So how many submarines, nuclear submarines, Russia is stationing in the Kola Peninsula, then the surface warships, right? And these submarines mostly are mostly equipped with like missiles, nuclear missiles, sea-launched missiles. It's launched from the submarine. That's Russian, right? So these submarines and missiles, and the naval, like a strategy, Russian naval strategy. You know, Russia has come out, I think, this is the current trend. I mean, Russia, Putin, particularly Putin, is he's very ambitious about, you know, this Arctic military strategy. He sees the Arctic as a very useful tool to elevate Russian power. Right? Putin knows that. So Putin, I think, announced. I think it was several years ago. Putin announced very big naval build-up plan, right? With a lot of money invested, huge naval plan, right? So we need to examine these, you know, Russian naval strategy and weapons, right? Submarines and all this, and American counterpart, American weapons, right? American submarines and, you know, and aircrafts. Arctic is a very good base for like an airborne, you know, operation, aircrafts, submarines, aircrafts, and everything. Right? So the U.S., mainly these two countries, how America, Russia, their military capability in the Arctic. That's I think we need to study more. Then other additional countries like Denmark, Norway, Canada. Canada is also important. Canada is I think beefing up their military capability in the Arctic. So U.S., Russia, Canada, their military, right, strategies and weapons. I think that's what we study on these issues. And right, this is just outline of the issues that the Arctic geopolitics poses. I think what we do to follow up on our discussion, I think we were living on the Arctic Council, right? Yeah, I think we were living on the Arctic Council, so we begin with again the Arctic Council. The Arctic Council, this is I think another area of research where a lot of reports and articles are being written, like a governance, Arctic governance. This is another area, Arctic governance, like a, yeah, maybe I have to add that as a five issue area, Arctic governance. That's fifth issue area, Arctic governance. Again, which is another, right, emerging issue, Arctic governance. Under this issue, I think what we do is first to look at what institutions are put in place in Arctic, because there are so many institutions. So many. Two big, I think, most important two big, I think, institutions are, like I said, the Arctic Council and UN clause. These two are most important institutions, right? But other than these two issues, there are so many different institutions, right? So Arctic governance, we look into these different institutions in probably environmental issues, right? There's an institution, and all these different issues, there are institutions, right? The Arctic Council, most important, right? And gaining in importance lately, because the Arctic Council, I think, has granted, like I said, permanent observer status to 6 countries, which attracted a lot of media attention. May 2013, the Arctic Council has granted, right, permanent observer status to 6 countries. Right? What are these 6 countries? Number 1, CJK, Singapore. CJK, Singapore. Is it 6? I think it's 6. CJK and Singapore, that's 4, right? Then you have India, right? Additionally, India. What else? Italy. Yeah. So majority of them are Asian countries, right? CJK, India, Singapore. 5 of them are Asian countries. So we need to think about why the Arctic Council is connected to Asian countries. So that's why Norwegian, think tanks, they are, sort of doing a huge project on Asia and the Arctic, into which I'm involved. Or they're asking me to write something about Asia and the Arctic, right? luckily I'm selected because China, Korea, Japan, you have three countries, right? From Western perspective, there are three countries, right? There are not many scholars who can write and talk, right, in English. So I'm one of them, probably. So I'm contacted a lot by these Western scholars over these issues and shale gas. So FNI, Fridtjof Nansen Institute, Norway, they're very big on this. They are leading a huge project on Asia and the Arctic. So they are studying these issues. Why Arctic? The Arctic, what's the importance of Asia in the Arctic, right? And the fact that Arctic Council granted May 2013 this permanent observer status to these countries sparked this interest. There's so much interest has been sparked over these issues and what lies ahead, what will happen after this. Particularly China. They're so anxious about the role of China, right? How China will change Arctic balance of power. So China has put one foot in the Arctic, right? Just one foot. But they're so concerned. Arctic countries are so concerned about this. The potential impact of China, right? So I think there's so many things we need to study about this. I mean, is China, number one, how is China going to change it? Right? Is China so-called revisionist power or status quo power? Is China going to keep up the balance, or is China going to break up the balance, right? And there are so many things we need to look at, what's the response of Russia? What's the reaction of Russia? Right? What's the reaction of Norway? What's the reaction of the US? I mean, over China being member, right? This is a good paper topic. How do they react to China becoming a member? Did Russia agree, or did Russia object? Right? How about America? How about Russia? Right? And what's the role of Japan and Korea? Is there anything Korea can do, South Korea can do? Right? Internally, I think in Korean discourse, the Arctic is, people on the streets, they don't know what that means. But high level policy sensitive people, they know the issue, the Arctic. Why Korea, should pursue the Korean interest in the Arctic, they know. They think that this is an important issue. And government, the president is pushing this issue, right? And the Arctic is more important in this government than in the previous government, under the Lee Myung-bak government. President Park thinks this is a very important issue. And how about Japan, right? Maybe 60 or 70% of all the Arctic and Asia, research on Asia and the Arctic, majority of them are about China. China's strategy, Chinese strategy about Arctic. Right? It's interesting. You know what? China, I think, apply for this permanent membership. They applied for it 3 times and failed. And this time, they have lobbied intensely. Right? Then the target was first Denmark, then including Greenland, Iceland, right? Sweden, Finland. These are the first group, right? China lobbied intensely. So that the country that came out strongly in favor of China, probably the strongest supporter of China membership was Denmark. We need to know why Denmark is strongly behind Chinese membership. Interesting, Canada is quite opposed. Canada is not quite. I mean, Canada obviously opposed. China is a consumer of more than 50% of Canadian minerals. Maybe in the future, Canadian natural gas, LNG. But Canada opposed. America opposed. How about Russia? Russia, China, this is what I have studied a lot. I have written a lot about Russia and China, like conflict and cooperation here and there, but in the Arctic, again, very mixed Russian-Chinese relations in the Arctic, like in other areas, very mixed. In other words, Russian claim about the Arctic, most important claim, I think is number one, Russian argument, number one, they own the territorial seas, most of the territorial seas of the Arctic Ocean along the Russian coastlines. Right? That's the strongest claim Russia makes. Directly contradicting this Russian claim, Chinese argument is Arctic oceans are globally owned rather than regionally or nationally. So China directly contradicts this Russian claim. Right? So this gives you a hint, right? The potential, right? Conflict between Russia and China, number one. And despite this, legal problems, Russia and China, they cooperate. They have signed several important, agreements over shipping. Russia, I think, shipping company Sovcom Float, Russian shipping company, right? They handle all these shipping companies. And Sovcom Float and Chinese oil company CNPC, they have signed important agreement where China imports Russian nickel and minerals, right? Other minerals and oil through this company, Russian shipping company, for many years. That was signed. Important agreement. Second important agreement, a lot signed, I think, 2013. A lot of important agreements were signed. One of them was, I think, Russia invited. This was done, I think, Xi Jinping's visit to Russia, May 2013. When Xi's visit to Russia, I think Russia invited CNPC, again, Chinese oil company, CNPC, to explore oil fields in the Arctic. Very important agreement, right? So China, Russia, they cooperate on Arctic resource extraction. Right? That was right, May 2013. As a side agreement, because of this, I think I mentioned this earlier in the chapter on Russia. Because of this agreement, China will buy 900,000 barrels of oil from China in the future because of this. So that China surpasses Germany. Right? So very confusing. I mean, on one hand, Russia, China, they cooperate, but on the other, they're enemies. Always. It's a mixed relationship. Right? That's Russia. And Denmark, most welcoming, right? The reason being, again, through Greenland, China, I think, invests huge sums of money into, right, resource extraction of Greenland, mostly. Greenland does not have the ability to, right, develop these resources independently. So probably I think that is behind Danish, I think, support. Sweden, again, is supportive. Finnish, supportive. And there have been a lot of bilateral, I think, exchange of visits between Sweden, Finland. So they are most welcoming. Big powers opposed, but these, right, Arctic coastal states, very good relationship with China. Right, I think I covered pretty much. Right, I was right. 6 countries. 6 new countries obtained permanent observer: China, CJK, India, CJK, Singapore, India, Italy. May 15, 2013. The meeting was in Kiruna, Sweden. Do you know Kiruna? The famous meeting in Kiruna. That was cited a lot. Kiruna meeting. Arctic Council in Kiruna. So because of this Arctic Council, I think the profile of Arctic Council is being elevated because of this. And Arctic Council has been a venue mostly for environmental issues so far. But the debate goes on about to go beyond environmental issues to include other issues, including military issues. So the current debate is whether or not the Arctic Council can deliberate on even military issues. It originated 1996, right? Arctic 8 countries, including Arctic 5, plus these 3 countries. They are not coastal states, right? These are coastal. Arctic 5 are coastal states, right? Iceland, Sweden, Finland included in the Arctic Council. Main purpose, this is a forum, intergovernmental forum, including indigenous peoples. They are invited, right? And even indigenous peoples, they supported Chinese membership, in fact. And, right, primarily, the purpose of Arctic Council, primarily environmental issues and research. Right, the focus was on environmental issues, but it's broadening. And decision-making power, very weak. The Arctic Council, decision-making power, very weak. And it's becoming stronger. Currently, it's becoming stronger and stronger. And there are some important agreements signed, binding agreements currently, right? Signed, including pollution control and search and rescue collaboration on these issues. There have been some binding agreements signed, right, inside the Arctic Council, which shows that Arctic Council is becoming more and more binding, powerful institutions, even to include military issues. And the inclusion of Asian countries as members, how that will change the Arctic Council, that's important to know in the future, right? But we can guess the politics of the Arctic Council will be much more complex, right? When they include Asian countries, particularly China, right? And it's becoming much more global, but, right, complex. Right. These are new issues in the Arctic Council. Now, CJK, let's look at how CJK, their strategies, their relationship with the Arctic. The observer status, right, that's not our goal, right? But by becoming a member, I think we should think about the benefits of becoming a permanent observer, right? I think in terms of responsibilities and rights, permanent observer is not the same as original member. There must be differences, but at least from CJK perspective, it's not full rights and responsibilities, but still, I think, in my opinion, becoming a permanent observer, it's kind of a same as spying on them, right? Like a spy, making sure, right, they don't do anything without our presence, right? So making sure we know, we follow, you know, what their plans are, what their strategies are, right? New decisions we want to know, right? So kind of a spying on them, right? And Korea, South Korea in the Arctic. Korea's Arctic interest began on a very fuller scale, 2012, which is under the final year of Lee Myung-bak government. Do you know Lee Myung-bak, the South Korean president? No? Never heard? Yeah, better not to know. South Korean President Lee Myung-bak, who stepped down the end of 2012. Then, beginning 2013, this lady came in. Right, in the final year, right, South Korea began to show, right, a lot of interest in Arctic affairs. So Lee Myung-bak began this trend, Arctic interest. And I think South Korean activities began much earlier, like 10 years ago. 2002, South Korea, I think, established Arctic Research Station, 2002. So it's been more than 10 years since Korea established. Like any other country, I mean, like I said, in Arctic issues, this scientific diplomacy is so important to give people good image, right? They hide their real geopolitical and business interests, right? And use this scientific diplomacy as a cover. Same thing. I think Korea began with this Arctic scientific research. So Korea established Arctic Research Center in Svalbard, on the island of Svalbard, 2002. China has it, Japan has it, every country, India has it. Korea began 2002, which is a little bit late compared to China and Japan. And more importantly, I think 2012, 2012, the first Korean icebreaker. Korea has one icebreaker. Around. This has been reported in the news media. Around. Korean icebreaker is called Around. And this huge icebreaker research vessel, right, was on the as of 2012 was on the third research expedition. 2012, that was third research expedition, and a lot of researchers from all over the world, they aboarded this Korean, research ship, and they studied different things like environment, right? Everything. And we did again last year, 2013. And President Lee Myung-bak's visit, September 2012. President Lee Myung-bak's visit to Norway and Denmark. This was a culmination of South Korean diplomacy in the Arctic. And Lee Myung-bak met with Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg in Norway and signed important agreements, right, over like shipbuilding, and in fact, Norway, South Korea has very good active relationship, and that trade between Norway and South Korea increased 70% in 2012. And South Korea, Russia is also, right, shipbuilding relationship. Korea is very good at making these ships. Samsung has, company arm of making these ships, specialty ships. Greenland, like I said, because of Greenland, Lee Myung-bak also visited Denmark, right? And signed some agreement between Greenland and South Korea. Let's look at Japan. Japan, very important. Japan relatively late in coming to the Arctic race, but their involvement in the Arctic trace back to early 20th century. Right? In terms of energy diplomacy, Japan has had a very long history of involvement here and there. Even the Arctic, they have a long history. And only recently did Japan adopt a very comprehensive Arctic strategy. And because the reason, like I said, Japan potentially can become a huge benefactor from the NSR. In Arctic diplomacy, Japan, their focus is on Russia. Japan's focus is on Russia. Here is very interesting dynamics between Japan and Russia. Japan's focus is on Russia. Some interesting dynamics. 2010, Japan and Russia, their relationship hit the bottom due to the territory issue, right? There are 4 smaller islands between Japan and Russia, which is in dispute. Because of that, under Medvedev, President Medvedev visited this, what is that called? What the islands called? Northern Islands, is it? Kuril Island, right? Medvedev visited Kuril Islands. Then made sure these islands are Russian islands, right? Because of that, Japan, Russia, bad relations. But things began to change. After Putin came in, Putin knows the importance of Japan, right? And both of them, their concerns, the rise of China, right? Here's the thing, 2012, Chinese icebreaker. In Korean, this is 설룡, but in Chinese, 슐롱. In English, snow dragon, the famous Chinese icebreaker, much more famous than Korean araon. This snow dragon became very famous, the first Chinese vessel to navigate the entire NSR in 2012, right? And this, because of this, Russia began to support Japan's candidacy for observer status. This is how Russia, Japan, right, getting closer. May 2013, this is actually unnoticed by Korea and by China. May 2013, a lot of things happened between Japan and Russia, like a Japanese company signed a deal with Russian, oil company, Rosneft, over the exploration of Russian oil fields. And Abe visits Moscow, April 2013. Right? Then there were several exchange of visits. Then famous 2+2 meeting. 2+2 meaning foreign minister, defense minister from both sides. 2+2, they meet. First 2+2 meeting with an Asian country, right? In history, from Russian perspective. Japan, Russia held this 2+2 meeting, right? Japan's intention is to elevate the port of Yokohama. Okay, I think time's running out. Can you read these PowerPoints? Okay, and China, I think I covered a lot about China. Some Chinese slides will follow, read about it. And I think this is the, although it's not complete, but this is the ending of the Arctic, Geopolitics of Arctic. Then Wednesday, we'll shift to next chapter, okay? Iran, Iraq, and the Middle East, okay? Then probably I think we can cover up to chapter 15 until the second quiz, okay? Then the textbook is done. Chapters after 15, you can read it, right? Later, if you want. So chapter 15 will be the last chapter this semester. See you next Wednesday.